Hi, welcome to tonight's Design Review Board meeting of August 10th, 2023. And we are here for a special meeting. And sorry, I'm trying to look at the first agenda. The first is a call to order and a roll call vote, please.
Chair Kim,
Here.
Vice Chair Chung,
Here.
Board Member Malott. Board Member Orisio is absent. Board Member Wilson.
Here.
Great. Thank you so much. Now it's time for oral communications. Anybody from the audience, either online or here live in person, has an opportunity to address any topic not on the agenda. And if you have something to say, then you have 3 minutes. So is there anybody who has a discussion topic that is not on the agenda? Staff, can we check online?
I'm just waiting 3 seconds for people to.
Terrific.
Listen.
Thank you.
And I see no hands raised.
Okay, and now is the time for a staff briefing. What I'd like to ask staff before we start our meeting is a clarification of the role and responsibilities of the Design Review Board versus the Planning Commission, and what we have purview as to what we can talk about and what we have discussion topic on. So if somebody could clarify the role of the Tiburon Design Review Board versus that of the Planning Commission and that versus Town Council, that would be very helpful for all involved in this hearing today.
I'm assuming this question is related to the first items on the agenda, which is the objective design standard.
Yes, and I think there may be some people here who don't understand what the role of the Design Review Board on how they can assess the objective, the ODS, and versus zoning. So that clarification would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so the discussions item tonight is for the objective design standard. The role of the design review board is to provide staff with design advice and recommendations in terms of what should be included in the objective design standard. Your recommendations will be incorporated into the draft, and the planning commissions will review the draft objective design standard, which will become part of the zoning code. So they will provide formal recommendation as of a formal amendment to a zoning code to Town Council, and Town Council is the decisions bodies to adopt a zoning amendment. Obviously, that's my answer, but there's other people in the staff today. Mary, our assistant town attorney, is also here to answer questions related to that.
Mary, could you, for the elucidation of the audience and edification, clarify the difference between ODS, objective design standards, zoning, and whether or not we have any say on zoning? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair Kim, members of the Design Review Board. So the odds are actually going to be incorporated into the zoning ordinance. So you do have input on the criteria that we've asked you to look at tonight and to weigh in and provide your recommendations to those criteria and what is being presented tonight. The Planning Commission will also review that. They'll have your recommendations as part of their packet to review when they look at the odds and the changes to the zoning code. They're the same thing, if you will. You know, the odds and changes to the zoning code are similar, or they're the same. So then the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the Town Council, and the Town Council will adopt the odds.
Understood. So ours is a role or body to advise and counsel, but we have no decision making in the process.
Correct. We're looking for your direction this evening.
Thank you. Okay, can we have, oh, there are no minutes, okay, to review. Discussion item number 1, which is the objective design standard, or endearingly called ODES, odds for the multifamily development property on hillside properties. Could you staff clarify odds and whether or not it applies to a specific parcel or if it goes all throughout town council? That would be really helpful for everyone to know. Thank you.
So I just want to do a quick introductions to our consulting team who prepare a presentation to answer the exact questions that you have, and it will go through the details of what our objective tonight. I'm going to introduce the consulting team of Bob Brown and also Matt. I'm going to share screen so they can share their presentation.
Before you start, so the format is that you will do a presentation, then you will open it up for questions, and then we will have an opportunity for the audience, whether it's online or in person, to speak for 3 minutes. And then should we close it to the public, and then we discuss amongst ourselves and make the recommendations. Is that the procedure?
The format is pretty informal, but you can follow the typical procedures so that everyone have an opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair Kim, for meeting management purposes, we would recommend that you follow that sort of standardized procedure that both the planning commission and the town council follow.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Matt Tacker. I'm with Wallace Robertson Todd. We're also a firm that was a sub-consultant to the general plan, as was Bob Brown. Bob, you want to?
Sure. Bob Brown, a planning consultant, former planning director here for a number of 20 years in Marin County. And we met, I think most of you last year via Zoom. So it's nice to see you in public. We were talking at that point about the downtown odds, the objective development design standards, so odds. And tonight we're talking about multifamily. So Matt, if you can start the presentation. I'll start tonight and then I'll hand it off to Matt for the heavy lifting. So what we're going to cover tonight is what are odds and why are we going about this process to create them? And specifically, as Chair Kim asked, where would they apply? So we'll cover that. And then Matt is going to walk you through a sort of an iterative discussion about design criteria. And we'll be seeking your feedback on that and also members of the public to engage in that discussion. And I would just note that we've divided this up into sort of 3 categories of criteria. Reducing effective bulk of buildings, blending buildings with the setting, and both of those are really addressed quite well in your current hillside design guidelines. And so we think we can take a lot of those concepts. They'll have to be quantified in most cases to make them objective, but they're a great starting point. And so we'll sort of build on that effort. And then lastly, we think there's also another category that should be addressed. How do we make sure buildings are responsive to neighborhood character and promote walkability for future residents there? And then we'll again have discussion from the board and the public, and we'll talk about next steps. So what are odds and why are we going about this laborious process? Well, under new state laws, odds are becoming increasingly part of the planning lexicon in California. And that's because the state legislature has sought to promote more production of housing by trying to move the process along and limit discretion at the local level. That's their concept. And so the new state laws state that for new multi-unit residential projects that have 2 or more new units, decisions that the town has to make related to design and development have to be based on objective standards. And those have to exist when the application is filed. So that's why we're going about this process. For projects that qualify for these state laws, the other problem is that, or challenge, I should say, is that these have to be reviewed very quickly for compliance with these odds. So the odds have to be very straightforward. And that process moves very, very quickly, which was the intent of the state legislature. Next, please. So what are odds? This is how the state defines them. They are standards that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official. And they're also verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark. And they have to be knowable to the applicant and to public officials in advance. So things like, setbacks, height limits, floor area ratios, those are all objective, and you have a lot of that in your code now. But much of the design review process has relied on subjective standards, things like defining compatibility with the neighborhood, or materials that blend with the natural environment. Those kinds of subjective criteria really can't be used for projects that qualify under these state laws. Next, please. Next slide.
Try.
So just again, to remind the board, last year we worked with you to develop standards for the downtown, both for multifamily projects, but also for mixed use projects in the downtown zones. And those were adopted by the council this past June. In fact, we put a copy of those in your packet, just so you can get a sense of the format and how those odds were established in the code. And these odds, again, took the feedback from the DRB and translated those into drawings and numeric standards. Next slide. And some of the important concepts in the downtown odds, and I think some of this will probably be carried forward in the new multifamily odds, things like limiting the size of blocks and the amount of building massing, trying to break up the facade into increments and articulate those, having step backs on the height of buildings as they get taller, making sure that buildings address the street properly and have obvious entries and have landscaping that blends them in with the streetscape. So with the design review board role, I think this may get at some of Chairman Kim's questions. So again, is the main idea is for the board to give feedback to staff and to our consulting team to incorporate into developing these odds. But to do so within the criteria that have been established by the housing element and the general plan. So the housing element has established maximum densities on these sites. That's what we have to design to. We will be testing the feasibility of projects to meet that. So let's go back. So tonight is the first meeting. And again, we're looking for you to give feedback, sort of set direction for us at sort of a high level. And then we'll come back to you in the fall with a preliminary draft of these standards. And also we'll show you some graphic examples of applying these to a couple of prototypical sites, both at the lower density, at the R3 density, and at the higher density, which would be the new R4 zone. Next. So where would these be applied? Again, a very important question that the chair asked. So as I said, these will apply to new multifamily projects that have 2 or more new units, which qualify under state law. They can qualify for a ministerial process if they meet certain criteria. So if a project with more than 2 units meets certain affordability requirements, meets requirements for prevailing wage for the labor force, and there's other criteria as well, those actually qualify for ministerial approval by staff. So there's no public hearings, there's no CEQA review. If they comply with the adopted local odds, they have to be approved. Now, there are other projects that add 2 or more units that don't meet those qualifications. And in that case, you're allowed to do your normal design review process. You'll use the odds as the basis for the zoning, but you can still apply your design review. You can apply conditions on the design. There's some flexibility there, but what you can't do is you can't deny the project if it meets the odds, and you can't reduce its density. So those are the differences there. And also projects that don't meet the odds entirely, or at least, excuse me, I should say more clearly, the projects that don't meet all of the odds then also will de facto fall into your normal discretionary design review process. Next. So specific sites that we're developing these odds for. There are 2 new sites in the housing element that have been designated for multifamily, the vacant portion of the Reed School site, and of course the site that I think most folks are here for on Paradise Drive. And they have different densities. The Reed School site is a higher density between 20 and 25 units an acre. Paradise is between 10 and 12.4 units per acre. But these also will likely apply to any redevelopment of your currently zoned R3 properties. I think those are all presently developed, but if those properties redevelop and have 2 or more units, these odds could apply. And then they could also be applied to any future sites the town might annex and zone for multifamily. Yes,
Isn't there a fourth? I mean, if you meet SB 35 requirements, aren't you also subjected to the odds, using odds to actually fast track multifamily anywhere?
that was the discussion on the previous slide. You know,
Yep.
yes. So
Anywhere.
if they qualify for state, but what we're specifically talking about are multifamily zone sites. So for example, if you had a single family property that qualified under SB 9 to be divided and had build two units on each property, that would not be covered by the work that we're doing, because you have separate SB 9 standards. We are only talking about doing the odds here for sites that are zoned for multifamily development.
So there is a separate set of odds for single family homes, smaller sites where you can actually use SB 35 to actually densify to multifamily units, and that's a different set of odds.
Now, SB 35 would only apply to multifamily development. So not a single family home in a second unit, or not a duplex would not apply in if it's not in a multifamily zone.
There are instances where it's not zoned as multifamily. What I'm trying to get at, you could
Right.
actually take any lot and actually make it a multifamily site using SB 35.
No,
And-
using SB 9.
SB 35. You can, but that would be subjected to this set of odds too. What I'm just trying to clarify is that that set of odds on multifamily for multifamily zones is actually also applicable to sites that are not designated as multifamily.
No, they wouldn't. We're only developing odds for multifamily zone sites. You
Okay.
already have SB 9 regulations in your zoning code. Those would apply to single family lots.
But I believe Chair Kim raised a good questions. We will investigate and return with a response to.
Okay, because this is a really important question, because you can actually bypass any zoning code, local zoning code, and build a multifamily home on any site as long as you meet the requirements under SB 35. And you would have to be qualified you would qualify it if it does meet the criteria under odds. I believe this exact same odds, then that would prevail.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah, so SB 35 applies to projects of 2 or more units. So if the town is subject to SB 35, which you currently are, I believe, and you will be until the next list comes out from HCD about who's on the SB 35 list, and they'll look at your progress, your annual progress toward meeting your RENA over this first 3 or 4 years of this 6 cycle housing element. So if you remain on the SB 35 list, you're right. Somebody could come in with a qualifying project, and we would have to look at the criteria in Government Code 65913.4 to determine if they're eligible for SB 35 streamlined processing, and the city would only be able to apply the objective design and development standards in place. Potentially these, if it's a hillside multifamily development site, it could be the odds that have been developed for a downtown site if the site was downtown. It could be, we may have to look at the odds that the town has already identified apply citywide. I believe you pulled them out from your existing regulations. So while what you're saying is correct, that the odds would apply, we could only apply odds to the SB 35 projects, the answer may depend upon where it's located.
so
okay, that's really helpful, because I think what I'm trying to get at is this set of odds can apply on the hillside anywhere, really, potentially anywhere, even if it's a single family zone currently, because SB 35 can overrule that.
okay, the ordinance that we'll be preparing
Yeah,
will be applied to the R3 and the R4 zones.
okay,
It will not be applied to the R1 zone. That's not the contract. That's not what we're doing. So
But we have other objective design and development standards that would apply to those projects.
okay, that's a good clarification. Thank you.
next. Oh, all right, I'll turn it over to Matt now to talk.
Sorry, can I ask one
Issue.
question just to
Yes,
follow on
please.
that?
Sure.
I think correct me if you're wrong, you were asking, can't R1 zone properties be rezoned to R3 or R4 in the future?
They could be. And if that was the case, then yes,
Yes.
the odds that are being applied for R3 or R4 could be applied to those upon a rezoning.
But actually, SB 35, you can actually bypass any zone. So if it's labeled as single family, you can actually build a multifamily home now using SB 35. And the set of odds that would apply if you're on a hillside sounds like this would actually apply to that. So it has broad implications. That's what I'm trying to get at.
It's, if I can just try and respond one more time, because you're correct.
Yeah.
The answer to your question is yes, properties could be rezoned in the future. And if they were rezoned to R3, the design and development standards that apply to an R3 or R4 zone would apply to those rezoned properties if they were no longer R1. SB 35 does apply in residentially zoned parcels or parcels that are residential mixed use development. What odds would apply to that development will depend on where it is.
So it's a geographic designation. It's a
For
geographic.
zoning, whatever residential zone in which they exist.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, we can explore, and I will stop so that Mr. Brown may continue. We can explore, whether it should be clarified. But my answer right now is, it depends on what zone it's in.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Matt Tacker. Yeah, I'm an architect and city planner and, helped to write the downtown ODDS, 35 years of professional experience. So we're going to now get into some of the design aspects of the presentation. So, what should the odds for hillside multifamily address? And want to underscore that we are intent upon building on existing standards and the hillside guidelines. And the first two, A and B, are drawn directly from your hillside dwelling guidelines. Phrased maybe a little bit differently, but to reduce effective bulk and to work with steep slopes. So not just one smaller parcel, but also big parcels and how that sits on steep slopes. And blend with the setting. I think in the guidelines that's called, working with environmental impacts, which could easily get confused with EIRs. So a little rephrase there. And then address neighborhood character and walkability, which is dealt with, a little bit kind of in the guidelines, but we want to, address more directly through our work. So the existing guidelines are adopted in 1981, and I understand that they've been well used and really have been very helpful. And our belief is that most of those guidelines can be converted to objective standards. We'd have to come up with metrics, measurable equivalence and so forth as far as the intent goes. And at the same time, we also need to maintain development feasibility that HCD, the state agency that takes a look at affordable housing issues and so forth, scrutinizes things to make sure that it's not going to compromise the economic feasibility or physical feasibility of a project. So reduce effective bulk and work with steep slopes. Let's take a look. One principle is to cut the building into the hillside. Below those bullet points, you can see a couple diagrams from the design guidelines. We can, basically force builders and developers to do that by maximizing the building height, having that follow the lay of the slope, and to make sure that we allow the cut for the foundations. And of course, and then on the right, what you see is a couple of illustrations on the bottom. On a fairly tight urban site, you can see how those garden apartments step down the hill. On the top, it's a single family home, a rather large one in Sea Ranch. Some of you might recognize that photograph. And it just illustrates so perfectly how a structure can really work with the slope, can actually even draw attention to it and help to bring attention to the nature that surrounds it. There's also reducing effective bulk by terracing the decks and terracing, features in the project. And that's the step back massing. So there can be step back requirements, limiting the projecting decks in terms of, how far up on the building those could occur and how far out. And then things like roof, having the principal roof form parallel with the slope, and limiting downslope gables. So a gable is basically the triangular peak that's associated with a lot of houses when you look at it. And so you want the slope of the roof facing downhill rather than that peak, which then basically adds height to the apparent height of the building. And then looking at things like overhangs and cantilevers, minimizing the amount of overhang and the amount of an eave, for instance. And then limiting the massing, breaking it up. This is on the lower right is a single family house, also from Sea Ranch, used to really illustrate how you can take a larger volume and really break it up and what that does in terms of allowing the building to look smaller and fit better with the land. Materials become important. One of the principles in the design guidelines is to avoid large expanse of any material on a single plane. In the downtown zoning, ODDS, we innovated this idea of a facade increment, basically limited the amount of width that you could have along the front face of a building before there's some sort of change, something that interrupts that single plane. So let's just break here and have a little conversation. And the conversation starters are a couple questions. What should hillside multifamily odds emphasize to reduce effective bulk? Do you agree with what you heard? Is there anything missing or something you'd like us to explore?
I spent a morning just working on this morning, which I'd like to bring to your attention. The front page of it is to look at hillsides. And the biggest single problem of multi-unit housing is going to be the scale, the size of it. It's larger than anything else on the hillside. So being able to break that up into smaller increments or clusters is going to be critical. And this graphic suggests and shows how you could take 3 or 4 unit clusters and break them up on a hillside and stagger them. And the critical part of it is actually to make a green seam between all of the clusters. When you look at our hillsides now, we have single family homes and every one of them has a setback front, back, and side. And the adjacent house has the same. The combination is when those setbacks are planted, it's almost always a green seam. And that creates the image of the scale of the homes that are there. And we want to come close to that if we can on multifamily, at least in the lower range of high density housing. This is 10 to 12 units, 15 units, maybe even 18 or 20. But you're able to make a house-sized element out of apartments. And I think that's critical toward what we'd like to see on our hillsides. We don't want to see a massive single complex with no separations. The best example of that is to look at Red Hill up here. Red Hill Circle has about 150 units on it, and they're white or light tan for the most part. And they have no separation between the units. It's just like a castle up there on top of the hill. That's one of the worst examples. One of the best examples is actually a large building that uses color, which is more important even than the size, to camouflage the houses, and that would be the Cove Shopping Center. I mean, it's a very large structure, but it doesn't look that large because it's medium gray with dark gray trim. And I'd like to see some of this incorporated into our hillside guidelines, which I wrote, by the way, in 1981. And these schematics follow that. Also, I know we're not officially looking at the downtown sketches, but I want to add something. The town has the ability to change those downtown guidelines. And page 2 of what I gave you are suggestions to break up the massing. You took my suggestion, which was to break up the elements, but you didn't do the area. You need to limit the area of of single planes, probably to 400 square feet is my suggestion, to keep the scale small for the downtown buildings. If you do the drawings that you suggest here on your drawing sheets, they could be 100 feet long and it'll look like a warehouse. So I don't want to dominate this, so I quit right now. But I would like you to incorporate these in your thought. By the way, there are copies of it back there for if anybody's interested.
We just ask some questions now.
Sure.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, we were looking for feedback at this point in the presentation on the opportunities to reduce the bulk.
Okay, so it's not just a strict presentation and then we ask you questions. I just want to,
There's more.
okay, then I have a question, just taking a step back because I was confused on format. I just have a general question as we go through this and think about recommendations. My understanding is that the state is either forcing or suggesting us to adopt the ODDS standards, but is there a review process from the state? Like, is there any constraints or restrictions from the state in terms of how we add restrictions, et cetera? Like, what is that?
Not really, although as part of the adoption, so as part of adopting the housing element, there's a program in there calling for the adoption of odds that meet the standards of the housing element. So in other words, odds that will result in development that can meet the densities of the housing element. So as long as we can make the case, if questioned by HCD,
Okay,
that yes, you can develop with, X size units on average, this height limit, these standards, as long as we can confirm that and make the case to HCD, then yes, we'll be fine.
okay, that's what I wanted to ask.
And one further point of clarification, as Mr. Brown put in the early part of the presentation, the definition of what an objective standard is comes directly out of state statutes and the Housing Accountability Act. So what is an objective design and development standard is exactly what Mr. Brown presented to you. That's what we have to be able to create.
Which the design standards do. The design.
That's what we're
Yeah.
presenting. Yep, exactly.
But it's to some degree a subjective process in creating those standards, but the output will be objective.
Yes,
But
exactly.
this process is, we have quite a bit of free range. to have this
Absolutely.
discussion.
Yes, there's a lot of creativity in creating them, but once they're set, they're sort of set in stone.
Yep.
Yeah, and the idea is to make it fair, even playing field for everybody, but the idea is that you have to meet the underlying zoning requirement. I mean, you can't use the objective standards to thwart what the zoning is trying to do. Yeah, that's the only caveat.
Is there a mix of unit sizes or building sizes, housing unit sizes that is sort of encouraged by the state, or do we make that up ourselves?
No, that's really up to us. I mean, obviously there are affordability requirements. So if you were going to suggest that, you're going to build 4,000, 5,000 square foot units, that real likely wouldn't
Gonna happen.
meet that criteria. But no, again, they just have to be, I think, reasonable and feasible from a developer standpoint. But yes, you can require, for example, smaller unit sizes up to a certain size, certainly.
And then the building code actually says what the minimum square footage is for like a studio. They actually say you can't be X amount of things or else it won't be
Well-
counted as a studio.
But for instance, I'm familiar with an apartment building in Santa Barbara area that has 550 square foot, 1-bedroom units that are absolutely lovely because everyone looks at the view and it's all the ocean view apartments and they rent for a couple of $1,000s each, but they're only 550 square feet. We have that possibility here for small units. So I would love to see proposed mixes of some kind.
We will be doing that. So Matt and his design team will ultimately be taking these standards and testing them. And they'll have to make assumptions about unit sizes as part of that process.
I think part of it would be a market feasibility study,
Mhm.
so seeing what the market could bear. Because I think a 300 square foot unit in San Francisco versus 1,000 may be different, you know,
I understand.
yeah.
There's also an issue of parking on hillsides. When you're designing an apartment building or a larger condo complex, the footprint of roads and parking can become very heavy on the site. So one suggestion that's made in this new design guideline for multifamily is to put the parking underneath the building and make it part of the foundations of the building. That helps when you're in your excavation. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, you end up with a large chunk of the site being asphalt.
I think right now we should go through the presentation and then let the public state their comments, and then we'll come back and then discuss and deliberate. I think that would make
Okay,
it
we'll
much
do
more
that.
efficient. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So continuing on, the conversation about massing and related to his working with the slopes, and you've got existing grading standards. A lot is relied on through the grading permit process. And because of the ODDS requirements, we're working with the town engineer, the fire chief and their consultants to convert or to try to, convert their best practices and rules of thumb into ODDS. An example of that would be, driveway slopes, 18% maximum, which is pretty steep driveway, but it's something that they regularly use as as one of their rules of thumb. And then also slope transitions that, in a effort to make things look more natural and all, you don't want sharp cutoffs as far as the grading goes. You want some transitions. And then this fictitious but representative parcel, just shows kind of typical terrain, that's similar to what Tiburon has. And then it shows you a little bit about how the ODDS might deal with a larger parcel and that has steep slopes. On the left, you see a slope analysis that has the different gradations from 15 to 20%, 20 to 25%, 25 to 30%, and 30 or more. 30 or more is shown in red and all. So you go through that process, and then maybe we have the cutoff around 25%. The general plan says discourage development on slopes exceeding 40, so 25% would be a conservative assumption. And then, the way a developer works the land is they have to get in there and be able to do some grading. So, allowing some buffer, maybe 25 feet of buffer into the 25% or more slopes. That's just one methodology. It's a kind of a best practice that I've seen applied in other communities and have used myself in my own master planning work. And it's shown here to allow you to respond and give us guidance. So what aspects of grading should be addressed in the absence of discretionary review? It's a big question, hoping that some of the conversation touches on that tonight. Blend with setting. Again, this was reduced environmental impacts under the hillside guidelines. Retaining walls are a ubiquitous feature. Want to make sure they're not too tall and not too wide. And we want to screen, large walls with landscaping. Finishes, limiting materials, making sure that they are, you mentioned color, more in the middle range in terms of gray tone, perhaps limiting the color in terms of earth tone, maybe towards, warmer, more natural colors. Materials that are natural and non-reflective, not too much glass. Maybe limiting the kind of glazing even, so it's not as reflective. Landscape materials, there's drought tolerant guidelines that will have to be commemorated, within the zoning, and so we'll be looking at that. Landscape materials located below structures, that means not under the structure, that means as you're looking up the hill towards the structure, there'd be some landscaping, again, as a way of reducing the apparent mass of the building and along the street, so that the street experience and walking is more pleasurable. Parking, limiting the size of parking areas and garage doors, not having more than 2 side-by-side cars for a single garage, the use of pilasters, lamps, those kinds of features to really break it up, and not allowing more long continuous garage doors all in a line along a street. Perhaps allowing it on one side of a lane that doesn't go through. This is the De Silva Island project that's in Mill Valley, just off the 101 freeway. And it's a pretty impressive design, actually, in many respects. What's hard to see there is that on the right-hand side, there's about 5 or 6 units, each with their front door facing onto this. It's effectively a driveway, but it doesn't go through. And the paving is expressed kind of the way a plaza would. It's got pavers, ornate pavers. And usually in my own work, I usually prohibit how many garage doors you could have all in a line, but in this case, they pull it off. The garage doors are interrupted with pilasters. It's not a through street. You have a lot of landscaping on the other side. And so, we're going to want to develop a kit of parts. It's not a one size fits all approach. We want to, make sure that the design character is excellent. And at the same time, want to give designers, architects, some flexibility to come up with creative solutions such as this. Here's another shot of that same project, a little closer up. And off on the left is an example of how their entrances are expressed. These are really nice materials. Might not be able to get exactly that quality of materials in terms for an affordable housing project, but the sense of scale I think we can attain, and the durability of the materials. We'll also be looking at things like equipment and refuse areas, make sure that those are designed well and are set off the street and are screened from the street, which has not been the case in some of the projects that I noticed in Tiburon as I did some site reconnaissance. So among the questions that I'm hoping we can touch on is, how should new multifamily development blend with existing neighborhoods? What's most important in terms of attending that, attaining that blending? Did we miss anything? Did something resonate? And are there any specific materials, styles, or design elements that we should be thinking about to include in the ODDS? The ODDS will also move policies that are in the general plan into the zoning. One example of that is this setback requirement. A development can't be within 150 feet horizontally from a designated ridge line, not 50 feet or 50 vertical feet. No multifamily zone parcels meet these criteria, but nevertheless, we would build them into the zoning. And there are a few things that will be hard to turn into standards, that we can do things like making sure that buildings can only be not wider than a certain amount without having a path and some greenery, like Jim suggested. But view angles from a neighbor's home is really difficult to convert into an ODDS. Bob, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, we just wanted to touch on this because it's obviously a very important issue, and a lot of your design review, I think, probably relates to view preservation, $1 million views in the hills here. But I wanted to sort of relay an experience I had. I worked for over a year with the city of Sausalito with a two members of the planning commission, and in fact with your town attorney Mary Wagner, trying to develop objective view preservation standards. And I'll start off by saying they do not exist anywhere in the country. I've looked extensively, and they don't, because they really are mostly a subjective thing. What views are important, how much is too much interference in the view. So just some of the issues I thought just to walk through carefully, just very briefly, to actually try to establish a view preservation objective standards, you would have to determine the exact vantage points to do a visual analysis from whatever surrounding properties might be impacted. So you have to actually pick where you're going to take the photo montage images, and obviously you'd use story poles on the subject property to try to define what that view impact is. You would have to define exactly what is protected in terms of views. Is it, Bay Waters? Is it Golden Gate Bridge? Is it Angel Island, San Francisco skyline? So what has to be protected? The hardest thing then is to figure out what is an impact, what's acceptable. Is it maybe blocking 5% of a total view shed? Is it 10%? Is it blocking specific, views of specific items? So that's very difficult and probably not very acceptable to most people, because not all views are equal. So, while you might have 5% view blockage, if it's blocking somebody's view of the Golden Gate Bridge, that just might not be acceptable to them, period. And the other problem is that under these state laws, you only have typically 60 or 90 days for staff to take whatever is submitted by the applicant in terms of view analysis and determine if it's accurate. And that's both staff and any interested members of the public. So the time frame is just so condensed. So after all of that, I will tell you that Sausalito threw up their hands and basically said that it just didn't seem practical, and their attorneys basically said this is just ripe for litigation. So I just wanted to cover that because that's something, frankly, that we don't think we can deal with, other than, as Matt said, trying to reduce building bulk and volume.
So you don't address it, so you're agnostic as whether it blocks views. You're just completely, is that what you're saying?
Can I respond to that? This is a project I've been working on for a few years myself, but the view value is the issue. You need to make a scale from 1 to 10, say, of what a particular view is worth, and then multiply that or add up all those numbers from various views of a house or a parcel, and multiply that by about $15,000 per home. And you'll find that view value is millions of dollars for many of our homes here. So it will become a litigious issue. I don't think there's any way of defining it in advance.
Again, if anyone can suggest any ways to quantify all of that and to figure out a way to do the analysis and verification within the timeframes we're dealing with, I would be more than interested to hear, because again, I've beat myself up over this for quite some time.
Well, and what we can do is we can, through the height standards, be able to, avoid the most egregious ways that the view might be blocked. Right now the R3 is a 30-foot height limit that runs alongside or sort of parallel to the slope and so forth. Maybe right where it's near a public street, maybe it needs to be a little bit lower. That's something we can look at, and maybe allowing a little more in the middle of the site. So we can look at those kinds of things, and the setbacks and the separations. So you get views, through, at least if the angle is right, you have, an opportunity for the views through a project is something we can take a look at. But as far as analysis of specific views, from certain vantage points and so forth, our view is that it's too complex to turn into an ODDS. We could, require the analysis, and if it moves into a discretionary permit process, which some projects will, then you'd have that information that you could work with. But as far as the ODDS goes, for those ministerial
So for the-
streamlined projects, be very difficult.
So it is possible that you have a project that does pass muster under the ODDS that actually does block views, because it is so difficult and it would open up for I guess litigious litigation, yeah, that you cannot do that. So you are recommending that staff cannot take that into consideration when looking at that. So it's not a criteria.
Well, certainly, again, for projects that qualify for these ministerial approvals, where it can, the only judgment is, does it meet the objective standards or not? There's no gradations.
But there's a citing standard that you can make
Yes,
on your ODDS.
citing.
Yes,
And the
right.
citing standard should be able to take care of part of that.
sure.
So that
Should be
if
able to
there
do
is an
that.
option of citing the building in a different place,
That's right. Yeah,
that would not block a
You
view.
could look at deep
It should be
setbacks.
taken.
Could look at deeper setbacks on the uphill side, less height on the uphill side, where a neighbor would be looking over the project. You mentioned the building separations, so that there's some vistas through the project and so forth. All that needs to be, that we can build into it. And at the same time, the housing element sets minimum density requirements for the purposes of the affordable housing production. And so we can't, shave so much of the development away that we can't get up to the density that's expected under the housing element. Okay.
No. No, I think the citing would prevail, and it's in the design guidelines. So I would suggest that we work on making sure that view value prevails over citing in an area if there is any other option. Because you're just writing into law
Right.
or design guidelines a lawsuit if you do that.
Right. And the state is going to take a hard look and make sure that the densities that are under the housing element are attainable. So there has to be, we have to find that, we have to thread that needle. So neighborhood character and walkability. Our intent is to, maintain the standards of the R3 district. And it's 30 feet from the natural to the finished and finished grade, whichever is greater. Front setbacks are 15 feet, really need a 20-foot setback for a garage door apron and a driveway apron. And then there's some things that we got to look at to be adapted to the multifamily. I don't think they're going to be too difficult. The building separations, I think, that we can build in. The maximum floor area ratio may not be an issue. Maximum lot coverage might be something that we're going to have to adjust in order to get the densities we're talking about. And then the neighborhood character and walkability, I believe as an urban designer, really rests really on how much active space and entrance you've got on the street, facing the street, versus blank walls and garage doors. And so I'm going to just show you a few photos from Tiburon to illustrate that point. This particular project, the front doors are recessed in a way where you can't see them, and so you get just kind of like a uninterrupted wall of garage doors, and the landscaping really is done in a way where the plants just aren't thriving. So in an ideal flat site, you might really want to have the garage door hidden altogether. This is just a comparison from a project of mine in Albuquerque, where you've got the what we did in terms of the entrances and windows, facing the street and actually having very little front setback and still being very walkable and so forth versus a project that's just in a nearby neighborhood that had the garages facing it, facing the street and the entrance buried really on the site. So then just going to, back to Tiburon, I think this is much more successful. This has a 2-car garage. But about a third of the front of each of those units is comprised of an entry alcove. You can see the front door, and the alcove or the porch, if you want to call it that, it has a canopy, and it actually and that entrance actually projects in front of the plane that has the garage door. So there's just a greater presence. More of a presence for the entrance than it would be the case, without that feature. And that, roughly 1/3 of the site also then is an opportunity to get a little more greenery, plant a tree, and this landscaping is doing much better. And I think this is a more successful project as a consequence. Another project in that was, you just looked at something that was 1 story right at the street. Of course, much easier views by the neighbors to look over it. This case, it's a 2-story project, also same neighborhood. You can't see the front door as easily. The entrance really is in the same plane as the garage door, so it's not as prominent. What it does feature is more living space overlooking the street, and it provides some eyes on the street, which makes streets just feel more welcoming and honestly safer to walk on, to know that neighbors and activities are overlooking the street, and so. Again, we're going to have to sort of balance sort of this desire to have more activity, upper story activity, maybe overlooking the street, and at the same time being able to see over the building because of views. So
Are you
we'll be working with you to
saying,
find that balance.
are you saying that this is 10 dwelling units per acre? This is, I think I know these projects, and I
Okay.
think they're around half that. So
I don't know what the
one of
density
the things
is.
I'm getting to
Yeah.
here is
Mhm.
everything you're showing us
Mhm.
has double garage doors in front of it.
Mhm.
And you can't get to 10 dwelling units an acre with that profile. I mean,
Okay.
I've worked in affordable housing for years.
Mhm.
And I think you have to get your garages underneath the building completely and have common garages rather than this.
Okay, we can look at that. I'm glad to hear you say that. Slope sites can be very challenging. It's sometimes difficult to, get an alley into the middle of the block because of slope conditions and so forth. But it certainly makes a more walkable street to have the garage doors off of the street altogether. Completely agree. So what's the right balance between having a more active pedestrian frontage versus the need to accommodate parking garages on challenging terrain? Thanks for starting that conversation. Should we regulate height even more on downhill side of streets? Being able to look over the building, for instance, and then, again, any materials, styles, design elements that you think would make new development more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. That concludes our presentation. Happy to answer some questions. Look forward to hearing the board and the public comment.
I think at this time, if the board has any questions, not comments to the presentation, that'd be great.
I just have one quick question. The floor area ratio and maximum lot coverage, did you just do some envelope math to back solve for the density requirements, or how are those numbers calculated?
Sure. Density takes the overall size of the parcel, and you take the number of units and you divide it by the acreage of the parcel. Coverage is the amount of building footprint. It's the percentage of building footprint that's across the whole site. So you take the area of the parcel and you also calculate the area of the building footprints. And so one reason that 30% lot coverage might not work is that's really a single family requirement. It assumes a lot of yard.
Okay, I was asking where the 30% came from.
Yeah. it
Those
comes-
are
comes from
existing
R3.
Those are existing R3.
Yeah,
In R3,
existing,
right,
yeah.
right, in R3.
Oh,
Okay, so
thank
it's not
you.
your recommendation.
I'm
okay.
sorry, I misunderstood.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you haven't recommended,
Well, I think we're going to look at it, you know, when we come back, we're going to come back with some sketch concepts for, you know, kind of representative sites. These comments that we're receiving tonight are going to go into some preliminary metrics that we're going to test out in the sketch concepts, and then you'll be able to see, you know, you'll be able to see the relationship between the sketch, the you know, fictional master plan and the zoning metrics that we're suggesting.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. At this time, we'll open it up to the public. If you have any comments, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we typically don't allow for ceding your minutes if you have extra minutes to anyone else. So if you could state your name clearly and your address, that's how we typically take comments. So should we do in person first then? Okay, great, thanks. Just come to the microphone, yep. And you'll see the time clock up there. Yeah.
My 3 minutes of fame. I'm John Larson. I think I'm the oldest person in the room here, probably by 10 years, I think, at least, maybe not. And moved here in 75. Mateo Drive was originally proposed for 34 homes on 10 acres there. Maybe, I don't, Jim, you were probably involved, but Hillcrest got involved, and all of the same arguments that we're using our concerns in our area. I represent the committee for Tiburon. Right now, we have 77 homes and over 100 people have joined our group, and we're very anxious to work with the town to try to keep the nature of our area there. In 75, when Karen and I moved here, the town worked with the neighbors and Hillcrest, and the 34 homes on 10 acres ended up being 17 homes. So, and then we were required to put in, of course, a couple of acres. So we have an open space for all of us. And we've been very, very happy there. Some of that we've been working for, we were surprised, I guess, most of us living in heaven over there on April 25th. We become very involved, much more so. Susanna and her lovely family are our neighbors there on Mateo Drive. She's got 2 super boys she's raising as well. I don't know how you do that all. And so we're just very anxious representing. I did send a 7-page letter, which I know is part of the meeting minutes. It's got the names of all of our concerned members that want to work with you to help you know, develop these standards. We are very concerned. We're thinking 4 homes on the acres below us there on site H, and we're quite stunned to see the 90 to 114 figure is quite stunning. And we've you know, there are many concerns that we have that have all been registered, I think, with the town. But thank you all very much for your work, and we look forward to working with you. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Chadden. I live on Old Landing Road. I'm a 30-year resident of Tiburon, and I submitted a comment number 31. It's pretty comprehensive. It's about 8 pages long. Yesterday, I doubt you've had a chance to look at it, but I would ask if you please could. My wife also submitted a comment number 13 that I think I urge you to consider. I'm going to just try to summarize the points. With 3 minutes, I can't begin to explain it all. But I think that the odds for R3 and R4 zoning need to be different because one size won't fit all. The purposes and densities of these zoning categories, which were created for sites 8 and H specifically in the housing element. I know they will apply to others, but they were created for those. And the housing element For example, specifies that the R4 zone for the site 8 is intended for lower income housing, and it's 2 to 3 story, for example, whereas the R3 is intended 100% for above moderate income housing. So we have different purposes for these zones. We also have very, very different neighborhood characters that have to be taken into account if these fundamental principles are going to be applied. For example, R3 is completely site H is completely surrounded by single family homes in a rural site on a rural road. Site 8 is surrounded almost completely by multifamily overlooking a school with the ranch up above. It's a completely different character, and you can't have odds for one that's going to work for the other. So I think the one thing I've asked is that the staff be directed to develop different odds for these two zoning categories. Some may be overlapped, but they need different ones. It's also true because of the state laws that have changed that the odds now have to be comprehensive, because they do limit discretion and determine the criteria for future development based on what odds are in effect at the time of the application. So now you have to go beyond just architectural and incorporate the general plan 2040 policies that relate to design and development. And I've listed in my comment 31, and my wife did in number 13, the specific general plan policies that mandate specific design considerations, and they have to be in these odds. They may be difficult to achieve, but they have to be there. For example, that new development shall not encroach on sensitive wildlife habitat. There need to be odds developed for that. And while difficult, they cannot be ignored. And that's true also for example, policy M30 that requires that water views for pedestrian and drivers shall not be obscured. So as Mr. Milat said, you can't just brush them aside because they're difficult to deal with. You have to come up with some odds. Otherwise, there's nothing to be applied to. There are no odds, then there's nothing to govern how this is going to be done. So we need different odds for R3 and R4. They need to incorporate the 2040 policies that the town council has said are required for this town for development and design, and they're all good ones. And I want to finally say that I think that you should ask the staff to retain an environmental consultant, because there are specific policies relating to environmental considerations that now need to also be in the odds. For example, ephemeral streams that require setbacks. This is not just architectural anymore. It's environmental, it's sustainability.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but your 3 minutes up a long time ago.
Okay, maybe my wife can pick up on some of the others if she's online, and I'm happy to address these some other time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Sorry. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to make a comment?
Good evening. My name is Kevin Louie. My wife and I live at 4535 Paradise Drive above the site H. And I really empathize with the difficulty you have at design review trying to navigate this whole process. We built our home 27 years ago. I submitted a comment, which you may have read already, but I agree entirely with Mr. Milat's idea of, if this is going to be built, have the least amount of impact visually, environmentally as possible. So I think going forward, for you to consider all of those issues. I know you're not in the position to rezone the property. You're charged with design and review. And so we sincerely hope that you will take all those things into consideration going forward to make Tiburon what it is. A lovely place to live and place that we feel proud to call our home. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Anyone else in person would like to make a comment at this time? Okay, shall we open it up to the online audience? We'll give it a couple minutes.
Yeah, so for the people who are online, would like to speak during this time, you can raise your hand. I see one hand. I'm going to promote him to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You can't see me though, right?
We cannot see you.
Okay, good. I don't want to have to brush my hair. Anyway, I live in Paradise K, and my name is Robert Wolfson, and I wrote you, I sent you an email with some of my concerns, but like the other two gentlemen said, or the other three gentlemen said, living in Paradise K on Jamaica Street, as I do, and driving Paradise Drive every day, as I do, sometimes more than once. I don't know quite how to say this. It's just wildly out of character. The very idea of building 93 to 100 units and basically a country road that has nothing but single family houses, it's just almost seems crazy. I mean, I know that you've got to come up with a certain number of units to satisfy the state, but this is certainly not the way to do it. I mean, anybody, this is just common sense. You don't have to be an expert on planning or design or anything else to see that to build 93 to 100 or 120, whatever it is, units on a quiet country road is just crazy. And so, I just wanted to say that, because that's what you stop anybody on the street and say, what do you think about this? It's a quiet country road. They're going to build 90 to 100 units. I mean, anybody would see that is wildly inappropriate. So I know that the city has reached out, and we have reached out to homeowners in Tiburon, telling them about the possibility of them building ADUs or JADUs, which is great. That I hope everybody in Tiburon, all the homeowners, know about this opportunity. This is obviously, I remember for many years, people I've known have said, oh, if only I could put a unit in my backyard. Look, I have plenty of room for it, but it's forbidden. Most cities in Marin, it was very difficult to build an extra unit. So I'm hoping that will do some good. And other than that, I just want the city of Tiburon the town of Tiburon to try to be creative in come up with a number of required units without doing this terrible thing to those of us who live on Paradise Drive. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Currently, I see no hand raised.
Should we give it a couple seconds?
I think we should. I see one more hand raised.
Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, hello. My name is Marianne Shannon. I live on Old Landing Road. And I would like to echo the sentiments of my husband. He actually sent in comment letter 13, and I sent in 31. He had it flipped. But I urge you to read those because they do contain information that's important to abide by our policies that have been adopted into the general plan going forward. And I have a few here. Policy S2 and programs SB, SF, SK, and SO contain sustainability policies and programs designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the impacts of climate change. And as Site H will be a sustainable development. In fact, it'll be the largest single development in Tiburon's housing element and the first of its kind after the adoption of the new general plan. The odds for this site set the example and should not be the exception, and follow the mandate in program S-B to, quote, implement the town's climate action plan to incorporate new emission reduction strategies, and best practices. The Hillside Odd should use renewable energy sources like solar panels, storage batteries, and electric chargers in all garages and public parking policy areas to implement policy S-2 and program S-K and they should preclude gas appliances and infrastructures in new hillside buildings, and reduce or require the use of appliances with high efficiency electric. I do believe also, though, that it's just too many people in one site on our tiny winding road here. I'm not against development at all, but there are other sites that are available and can help the town to reduce the impact, especially on our environment where we're so close to the water with site H, and the runoff will impact endangered species, and that needs to be really carefully considered. Any waterside development needs to be given specific odds to help the environment. Thank you. It's
Thank
up to
you.
I see another hand raised. I'm going to promote.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, please state your
Yes.
name. Thank you.
Yes. James Collins, 16 Old Landing Road. Thank you very much to the members of the committee for being here today. We really appreciate your service. As a resident of Old Landing Road, I just want to speak to some of the very special aspects of the area we live in, and then Site H in particular. Site H, because of slope, the street it is on, and then the environment, all make it really important that you consider any standard that will impact that site and the attendant area. We're really fortunate to live in a community where we have a neighborhood and an environment that we can enjoy. And we understand that we need to have higher density housing somewhere. And we're very happy to contribute within the area of Paradise Drive. But we absolutely don't think that the environmental impacts, plus the potential for the slope and the site to create hazards for the community must be considered very carefully. We'd also like you to very carefully consider our other neighbors and what they're saying about other potential housing sites. I know that's not within your purview, but we appreciate anything you can do to reconsider Site H, and also very carefully consider how we might be able to make Site H not environmentally impactful, and that the slope and the street and the environment will be considered carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I do not see any more hands.
We'll give it 10 seconds.
No.
Okay, thank you. I think at this time, thank you for the public for your comments. At this time, I'd like to open it up for the board to actually ask staff some questions. I'd like to lead off the questions. Attorney Wagner, could you explain to me about the odds and the ministerial process and the intersection of CEQA and NEPA? The odds are not about thwarting or addressing NEPA or federal NEPA requirements or CEQA or state CEQA requirements. These are just design standards. Is that correct?
So yes, the odds are not designed to thwart or circumvent CEQA or NEPA or any other environmental law. They are design and development standards, just as the title indicates. You asked how that intersects with ministerial approvals, such as any kind of by right approval or SB 35, as we talked about previously, or SB 9 projects, as Mr. Brown brought up. Because those projects are ministerial, they're not considered subject to CEQA. So there's not additional CEQA review that occurs with those projects.
But they are subject to NEPA.
If there's federal involvement.
If there's federal funding, then there is NEPA involved.
I have to admit to you, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that the odds, definitely will address design issues, but a couple of the speakers have asked about environmental criteria. And they can establish environmental criteria, for example, setbacks from stream courses, or preservations of heritage trees that are defined over a certain size. So that there can be environmentally based regulations that are part of the odds and become zoning standards.
But we have to, at the minimum, abide by what federal environmental and state and local environmental or requirements that, as stated, we cannot override them. Is that correct? Like, we can't make it worse. We have to at least meet what the requirements are.
If there are federal water quality standards, air quality standards, those things, yes, they have to be met.
Okay. I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that.
And just to be clear, just because a general plan policy isn't specifically written into your zoning ordinance, doesn't mean it doesn't apply if it's objective.
Thank you for that clarification for everyone's edification. The second question I had for you was that regarding the zoning. And so we have a density requirement, or actually, something that's been set up for us. So we are not commenting on that at all. That we are taking as given because we are the design review board and not a planning commission. Is that correct?
So Chair Kim, members of the board, you're not being asked to weigh in on how the housing element or housing element programs where those issues have already been identified and the town council has adopted those documents.
And just for everyone's edification, the California Building Code regulates, so we cannot go worse than what the California Building Code requires, but we can go more stricter than what they require. Is that correct? So if the California Building Code says for multifamily, we need to strive for, we have to have solar panels, we have to have electrification. That's the code.
Well,
And we cannot be worse, but we have to meet those standards. So I just want to make sure that people understand that we cannot have a statement on building code.
so the building code, the fire code, those are state codes, they still apply. But I will say, because it did come up, the town council's already adopted building code standards that greatly exceed the state standards when it comes to solar electrification, EV charging requirements. Those are already adopted by the council earlier this year, and they will apply.
And as design review board, just so that people understand, we cannot state how those kinds of measures are applied on a building. For instance, we cannot say that, talk about glazing, the reflectivity and solar heat gain. If the building code requires a certain minimum coefficient on solar heat gain, we cannot be worse in order to, our design cannot supersede that. So I just want to make clear that that's what regulates, and we cannot talk about the position and location of solar panels.
No, you probably could develop standards, for example, how far solar panels could be raised off a roof line. So they may have to be, flush to the roof, as long as it doesn't preclude solar from being functional. So there are some design standards that could be adopted.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Sorry. If anybody else wants to.
Because I'm happy to go. So I guess I've got a list of comments that I'll try to quickly go through. So I think the first time we went around, some of us were here, some of us weren't. I kind of went through the stages of grief of like denial and anger of like, I can't believe they're going to build this downtown in Tiburon. And eventually you get to the acceptance, which is like, hey, what can we do as a design review board to really move it from what is a very subjective process to an objective process, objective standards that we can help set. And I think that the exercise we did for downtown came out nicely. I mean, it sounds like there's still some tweaks that Jim would like to see, but from where we started, I was really appreciative of the process that we went through. So with that in mind, I'll just go straight to the acceptance and try to give what I think is the assignment tonight, which is some feedback on at least my opinions on a lot of examples that we've seen tonight. So I guess starting with view, like I'm in agreement. There's no possible way you're going to be able to get to an objective number or something that's objective on view, right? I think anybody that's been on the design review board for any period of time, it goes into people's homes and this is killing my view. And it's like a tiny little portion of like a massive, 180-degree view. Other times it truly is like ruining their view of the Golden Gate Bridge. And so to get to something that would actually be something you could calculate would be, and I appreciate you sharing an example of Sausalito. I could understand how frustrating that could probably be to try to get to something that I think is impossible just because everybody has a different opinion of view. Something very subjective. That said, I think that there are things that we could do as part of this exercise. I think that it was kind of alluded to there is like, hey, we've got the 30-foot height limit, but I think that view is most impacted by the edges of the property. So whether that's the street, whether that's, the left and right and back property lines. But I think that there's definitely things that we could do to, similar to what we did downtown, is like really bring down the height on those edges. Because the people that are going to be most impacted by view are the neighboring properties, most likely, or an uphill neighbor or something like that that's going to be impacted by the edges. I think, as far as there was an example on slopes, I guess there was a illustration where it was somewhere like on the East Coast, something like that, Pennsylvania, which like kind of, I think, as the preferred versus not preferred. I think when it's talking about the things that you could do with, I'd almost prefer more cut on some of these large sites, just as a way to put more garages and other things down lower. As opposed to trying to perch as much, I guess the example there was all the houses kind of perched on a hill that didn't really get cut in too much, versus like I guess right now we don't have a maximum amount, but I wonder if there's things that could be done on percentages of garages, like percentages of parking underground or something like that, where there's, I think to require it all to be underground is impractical, but is there something where by requiring a percentage of it takes less off of the street and allows for more landscaping or some other things? I definitely like the ones that, even if it's a small amount of vegetation that breaks up the front, I think is a big positive. I am very much in favor of the pedestrian oriented frontages. I realize that that's sometimes hard to do on some of these steeper sites, and why you end up with, I think it was an example, looked like maybe Red Hill or something like that. The problem is that's an example also of garages that I don't like on, and it was pointed out earlier, it's like the exact other side of the hill that we also don't like, right? And I think the reason why that hill looks so jarring the way it is, that covered with so many of those multifamily units, is because it's not broken up by anything, right? It's each unit is one color. There's no greenery in between. There's no changes in facades. If you look, and I think it's just because they were built in a very close timeline to each other, trying to maximize. I mean, if you look at other hills in San Francisco, like a Twin Peaks or something like that, I'd argue that the density probably gets to something close, but it doesn't look so jarring just because it's so broken up by different developments over time. So I think some of the stuff that we did with the downtown of like, how do you use more materials and more, changes in facade or whatever, I think definitely applies to this. Other stuff, let's see, pedestrian standards. Can't read my own chicken scratcher.
As a suggestion, can we stick with the first one, the bulk, and work with steep slopes, and then we'll go through each one of these, and then we'll go through the one that was excluded, which was the views.
Yeah, I thought originally it was, so we're going to stop on each one and go through them as we went through them. but
So, like-
so I just tried to take notes as we went through the whole presentation.
Yeah.
So I guess I think I've hit most of my notes, and I think that the bulk, I think where we tried to pause there, like, I think the design guidelines that we have now are very much kind of what we want to try to see translated over. Many of those principles I think still apply, to multifamily. Outside of that was kind of my, and then I guess I really like the example of De Silva with the alley, because I think that you are able to put in, if it's something that's hidden by, as a driveway that someone wouldn't necessarily use. There's places in Point Tiburon that has kind of, I think, done the same type of thing, where you've got quite a number of parking spaces that are, not seen from either street frontage. It really works. So I don't know how you incorporate something like that. And I guess the other, I think it was Miles that mentioned maybe last time when we were going through this exercise a year ago, which is, Point Tiburon is like, if you look at any smaller quantity of that, it's a great design, but too much of it is a bad thing. So whatever we can do to, kind of force the breakup of that, is what I'm. I'd also, last time, and maybe this is kind of where we get to with the next meeting, but last time you had a lot of examples of very specific, like, what if Juanita Lane looked like this type of thing? And I'd be kind of curious, because it's hard for me to, on some of these different sites, like what would a, site that was sloped like this, roughly this size, look with this amount of density that gets us to our state requirements look like? So.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the things that is generally overlooked in the massiveness or bulk of a building is color. And I honestly believe that color is more important than size. And when you're looking at something from a distance in particular, but across the street or from a neighboring parcel. Our hillsides have now almost completely been treed over. Back in the 1960s and 70s, when we started planting, we overplanted, and we have now a massive fire hazard on our hillsides, but it's gray-green, and it has a light to dark value range of 70 to 90 on a grayscale, 70 to 90%. It's green, it's light green, it's dark green, but overall, it's a 70 to 90% grayish green. That's what we have to put these new buildings in. To make any building sort of disappear into our hillsides, or at least become a part of them that's comfortable, we need to maintain the color range sort of in that group. I would say 50 to 80% gray greens or grayscale would be appropriate for almost any new building, with the trim being darker than the body of the building and the roof being darker than the bottom of the building, or the elevations, the walls. So for my money, color is the most important thing that we have to use as a camouflaging element. And we should get rid of the idea that I promulgated in the original design guidelines of earth tones. Earth tones have been translated into light tan, light yellow, light rose, light anything. It's the light to dark range or value that's the problem. We need to make these buildings darker. If they don't stand out on the hillside, we will accept them more easily. And this green seam idea of separating clusters of a building are important. And Brian said too much of a good thing. I agree with you 100%. These clusters need to have different character and different materials, but still in the dark 50 to 70% range for the body of the buildings, and darker still for the trim. White trim or light colored trims outline the building and make them look larger. You can experiment yourself, just look on the hillsides and see what I'm talking about. But that's one of the reasons the Cove Shopping Center is sort of a benign, quiet building. It's dark grays and you just don't notice it very much. So the last page of these 4 pages that I gave you goes over what I've said. And blending with the Tiburon hillsides has long been a principle. The original design guidelines have that on page 14. Blending with the hillsides is what we're trying to do. Camouflage is another word for it. So I'd emphasize as strongly as I can. There's another sheet in here, the 3rd sheet. Grayscale, you know. And that should be part of the design guidelines and should be part of your report too. And then I'd go back to our downtown Tiburon one. I'd just like to add this for a moment. We need to have a setback from Tiburon Boulevard at the bottom of the buildings that go up on each side. They shouldn't go up plumb. They should be set back at about a 4 and 12 pitch is my guess, so that they're terraced up. They can be irregular, they don't have to be exact, and there's a sketch of it on page 2. The idea is bring in more light and let the trees have more room to grow. Because if you put a columnar or a fence wall on each side, those trees are going to be fighting the buildings forever. And we all want trees on Tiburon Boulevard. And then back to the first page, when you're working with a steep slope, steep in Tiburon is 2 to 1. That's the actual it's generally considered the maximum angle of repose. 2 horizontal measurements to 1 vertical. Comes out to be somewhere around 26 degrees, I think it is. If you get any steeper than that, you're working on a cliff. So you probably aren't going to have anything steeper than that we're going to be designing to. But the advantage of that is you can get a lot more terraces in a steeply sloping site like that than you can vertical elements on a flat site where you go up 30 feet and you're dead. But on a sloping site, you can get 6, 7, 8 levels in a cluster. And because the ground is going up 10 feet every 20 feet, you know, you're never running out of height in the building. So in some ways, a sloping site in this range of slope is easier to design clusters and very handsome buildings on, particularly if you tuck all of the parking in group parking underneath and don't take up a 400 square foot garage plus a 400 square foot apron plus a 400 square foot driveway for each house. That's 1,200 square feet of ground for each unit approximately. So I'd encourage you to crank this into your design, and we ought to have it in our design guidelines. Thank you.
I have a couple of thoughts. The first kind of high level and the second more specific. You know, I think there's been a lot of discussion around how to integrate multifamily homes into single family home areas. And for me, it's try and make them look as similar to single family homes as possible while meeting the density requirements. And, you know, kind of building off some things that have been discussed today, varying colors and materials, varying clusters. You know, forgive me, I'm like a math person, so I just go to, there's some simulation given the requirements and constraints and the different sites that have been evaluated, you know, throughout the process that can kind of give us some of these, you know, widths and step backs and things to achieve the general goal of how do they look as close to single family units that are in a neighborhood, but meeting the density requirements and, you know, being multifamily. building. So that's more of my just philosophical approach of what we should be shooting for is we get it. They have to be multifamily homes. They're going to be surrounded by single family homes. It's trying to make them look as close to single family homes as possible. And I think there's some exercises to do to at least achieve some of those standards. The more specific thing, Suzanne, tell me if I'm going out of turn talking about view preservation. Are we on that? Am I just running through, or are we going to come back to it? I understand the challenges of trying to make view preservation objective, but it is the third goal of the hillside design guidelines. And I struggle accepting just throwing it out the door. I don't have a solution right now in this room, and obviously you have done a lot of work on it with Sausalito and other towns. I would like to better understand the implications of adding at least the most egregious view blockages within, it is a scale, right? I think, Brian mentioned everyone has different, varying degrees and interpretations about view blockages, but, there are ranges that could potentially be added in, like you cannot block 80% of the Golden Gate Bridge from your living room window. And I'd just like to understand the scale at which we'd be comfortable, or the implications of adding something like that.
That's a really great point of departure, because I can tell you, like, how many years have we been doing this? Like, trying to actually quantify something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. The problem is, it's like, has your view of the Golden Gate Bridge, like, have you been looking across an empty lot, and the only place that the person can build the home, a one-story home, is going to block your view of the Golden Gate Bridge? Should they just not be allowed to build a home there? So then you have, like, it's not just the Golden Gate Bridge in Tiburon. It's the Golden Gate Bridge, it's Raccoon Straits, it's Angel Island, it's the city, it's Richardson Bay, it's Mount Tam, it's the Sausalito shoreline. Like, every single person values the view that they have, and would argue that their view of what they value out of their view is just as important as the Golden Gate Bridge.
But my pushback to that is, I agree with you, but then the neighbors, the applicants, have the ability to come before the board and argue their case, and we make a subjective decision, and we understand, hey, you're right, the only way you can physically build a structure here is by, like, trimming off, a portion of Raccoon Strait or something. And that is a discussion within the design review board meetings. This does not allow that at all.
Yeah.
It gives a builder carte blanche to obliterate a view. And I don't think we will be able to solve every minor view blockage, but I think there should be discussion of we need to take care of the most egregious potential things. And do we have the ability to quantify that?
So I'm a math person as well. So I think of the hedonic method, where you ask somebody the value of something, and then you can build an econometric model based on that, right? Those variables are all over the place. The coefficient for each of those variables are all over the place. I don't think you can actually come to a number, which is the value of that view, that can be mathematically captured. That can be captured by equations. And therefore, what we could do is really look at all the different circumstances and use height and bulk, and also separation between buildings and setbacks as a method, as a proxy, because I think the biggest issue is that the odds has to be objective. And if it's not objective, litigation will go crazy. And it's going to be litigated like crazy.
Well,
and that exposes a city and it exposes this town to crazy lawsuits. So I'm wondering, like, let's start thinking about some situations where you have a street and you have a building down here, downboard from a house that's over here. So let's think about it. Like if we set back from the street and we set a height limit from, X amount of feet from there, this person should be theoretically able to have a view. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, let's start thinking about how we can use a setback to actually think about, well, this person's view is going to be,
And you can,
Sorry.
and you can be objective on on the uphill property line, right? You can set super low height limits, right? And then, because that's
I knew you were going to draw that second.
90% of the time is where the view is impacted for an uphill neighbor.
Yeah, and like what I'm actually thinking about is a situation where we see all the time what we see are streets, and we see a row of housing on this side, and we see the house coming down. So if you think of the street section coming down, this house right here, if it goes too high, this person's view is going to be blocked. So the idea is like if you're on certain streets, and the way that the streets are actually carved in Tiburon, I can't say all the time, it's unlike San Francisco. In San Francisco, there's a monotonous grid that's just overlaid all over the streets. Here, they work with the contours somewhat of the hillside. And if they don't, if they go perpendicular to the hillside, that's a different situation. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think either you have, and it may be incorrect, but I think you either have streets that are parallel with the contour or you're going against the contour. I don't know, Jim, you've been around longer, but I think those are the two key conditions that I'm thinking about.
I just drew a diagram here that lets me think. If you have two houses, the elevation of the rooftop of the lower house cannot come any farther than halfway up the lowest floor of the house, upper house. You would solve most of those problems because it would vary with the slope.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to set a setback. You would be working on a height constraint.
So the height, then what you're saying is that currently the hillside guidelines say this is a slope. You take that line and you strike it up 30 inches or 30 feet above that. In conditions where it's right against the street, then if we set that back, that means it pushes it down the street. And
It
so,
would depend in part on where the uphill
yeah,
house is located
Yeah.
on its site.
yeah.
And obviously on the slope, but it would be an objective standard that you could regulate the top of the view blocking building by controlling its height relative to the upper gate.
So maybe that's the objective standard. If there's a house up,
I could draw that. I got that diagram
Yeah.
here. It would take a little bit of work. but-
so there's a circumstance right here where we can have an objective standard that says if there's a house that's, up from you, X amount of feet this way, you have to, build it such that your height is, a percentage. I like that idea because that's the problem, right? That's the
Yeah.
big problem is if someone's already existing, they're up the hill. And so you don't want to build this house. Or build this building or structure to block that view, right?
I like the concept. I wonder though, like using another house that is existing that could change is
That's
kind of
true.
a weird variable.
That is true.
But I think the math could probably still work out where it's like if the slope of the lot is X, right? And then, based on how far the house, how far the development begins, then there's a there's a mathematical calculation on how high it can be at what distance from the
It
street.
doesn't require a lot of variables. You just effectively what you're doing is you're working up half a floor to the bottom floor of the uphill house and establishing a plane and saying, roof of the lower house.
But-
Can't go through that
But
plane.
I think what he pointed out was, I think actually is a valid point, is that there's an existing house. What if there is no house and
If there is
it's,
no house, then there's no issue.
there is no,
there's-
but there could be an issue if you own that land and you want to build
Yeah,
that
but
house.
it's too late. I mean,
Yeah, but it's, but you think about it though, these are, in some cases, these are large lots, right? So there might be 6 houses, each house has like each if there's let's say 6 houses across the street from a large lot, then which house are you going to use? You're going to use the 2-story, the 3-story. You're going to let's say one's at grade, one's higher up. Yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna be able to solve it. There's only so many time, but maybe our direction is something that is a proxy for view blockages in terms of height limits, setbacks, using the X and the Y axes. And there's some data that can be established to help.
As it relates to the slope of the actual lot that it's going on and the uphill lot or something like that.
I anticipate we'll get a drawing from board member Malat, which will be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to make some more comments? Did you have any additional comments?
Well, I wanted to ask, can I ask some questions?
Yeah. And what I was trying to do before, I was trying to actually get you to talk about each of the 3 points, and then if there's a 4th point to talk about those. So I was just trying to make sure that you talked about like
I took
neighborhood
notes.
character. Okay, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask them, do you think what we just discussed is realistic in that, like, I see the diagram, but that's not how the plots are in real life, right? There's elevation changes, there's elevation dips, and like it's, and yeah, exactly. I don't know if trying to implicitly solve for view blockage is going to actually solve view blockage, and it's going to over-engineer to create a bunch of other problems. So
I think the strategic thing is to really look at all the sites where the odds are going to apply, and that is a limited set of.
It's not though, right? Because I think that, as we discussed earlier, this expands is more broad.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, this is going to be similar to last time, right? You're going to go back and we'll have another meeting where you'll bring some stuff to, so this isn't like the end discussion. Like the cool part is that, they'll come back and they're like, do you like this one more? Or do you like this one more? Here's the trouble, here's the problem if we do it this way. And so they'll kind of be the follow-up discussions, which, I think the first one is kind of like, hey, get all the stuff out there that might be the possible ideas.
Yeah. I guess maybe my request or suggestion is I'd be interested in hearing what you guys think is a reasonable, explicit view blockage
Proxy.
Well, no, explicit.
Okay,
Like, so,
explicit, okay.
and I would just like to learn, like, hey, yeah, if we say you cannot block any of the Golden Gate Bridge, but here's all the problems with doing that. Like, I think would be good to have the discussion if we put an explicit design standard, which it sounds like you've done, but to kind of educate us and the public a little bit more of the challenges of that.
I've been to homes where they say the view of Mount Tam is the most important thing. I've been asked to sit on a toilet to see that view and how it's being blocked. And they say, this is actually a prime view from a prime room for me. I'm serious.
But
I have similar stories.
But it's not supposed to solve every interpreted view blockage. It is to have to see if there is an ability to put some protection against the most egregious view blockages.
But what would it be? I mean, again, like just using the Golden Gate Bridge example, while I'm totally like I can say that I've never supported any project that blocked anybody's view of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? I will say that, like, even defining the Golden Gate view blockage, because people will take you out to their yard, like, should it be protected from the corner of your lot?
I've had people say, stand right here at this corner. If you stand on this little thing, you will see the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's going to get blocked. And that's my prime view.
Well, I have to say, there are so many design ways to take care of all of these problems. If we could establish sort of a basic concept that if there's another alternative part of the site you can build on that doesn't block a view, that's preferred. I mean, to me, that's probably a better solution, because as someone who's faced 1,000 different house sites in Marin County over the years, there's always a different way to do it. I mean, always.
Okay,
But I think the point of the exercise is that like to get to the densities, they're gonna have to basically fill up most of these lots and.
Yes, but not necessarily all of the spot. They can't fill all the site area. I mean, they're gonna have to. They're gonna have to have space between clusters probably, if we.
yeah, for
get that
fire
passed.
exits and all
And
the
if we
other,
have space
yeah.
between clusters, then we can tuck the garages underneath the buildings. That takes a huge pressure off of the overall site. So probably less than 30% of the site is going to be built on, and another 10% might have roads on it. That's my guess. So that means you've got 50%, maybe 60% of the site that is open, and that means you can move things around on it.
I mean, I think our role is not
Mm.
to be prescriptive. We're just trying to say, let's just see what we can do. So let's just say, give us something that could deal with the view issue. I think that's one of them. I'd like to make a comment about walkability. I think it's really important to actually provide sidewalks.
And on-site walks.
I mean, that seems very, very simple, but it's a huge deal. Especially, you know, I know that there's some sites along Paradise in the Marin County area, that unincorporated Marin County areas. And why can't we allow for sidewalks and ask developers to actually put in sidewalks?
But I think asking them to put sidewalks in is one thing which we could definitely, I think, do as a requirement of that development. But I think the problem in some of these cases is the sidewalk that is before and after.
No, I think
the developed
it
yeah.
is, but hopefully someday in 1,000 years, we'll have a network of continuous sidewalks.
It's more
I mean, that's-
important than that. On the steep hillside, when you get up into the 25-30% range, you can't walk safely on that hill. It must have stairs and it must have handrails.
Yeah, FHA. Yeah, we have to meet
You're gonna
FHA.
have to have that, and you have to be able to walk laterally across the site too. And then you've got fire and police and things like that to deal with.
So one of the things that I'd also like to talk about, I mean, this is my preference, is I've seen it on some houses on the other side of Paradise, towards the tip of Tiburon, where you actually have a break between homes or between lots. It's again the same concept that, you know, we talked about with the downtown. It's just a relief and a way to actually see the view and actually understand the context of where you are. To have like a monotonous wall of apartments, I think that's just a non-starter for me, especially at the street level. If you're walking and going across, that's just, I don't know. I always think of San Francisco and where the views are democratic, and here they're all captured and they're privatized. So something in between.
That brings up another point. I think it's a really interesting one. When you have a multifamily compound, you want to have access through it by the public, not just by the compound owners. So sidewalks should be open to the public, exterior areas. These are houses, they're cluster houses, but this is a much more densely used piece of ground than most single family homes.
You know, I know also in the past, we've looked at kind of the driveways associated with faster roads. So like Paradise in particular, we've you know, often evaluated is the pullout area and the driveway enough like that you can either turn around, slow down before you have to like dart into a driveway or something like that. So I guess I'm just wondering, is there something that could be set as a standard where based on the speed of the road that it's on that you, because like it would be miserable to have an entire row of garages, for example, on like a fast Tiburon Boulevard or Paradise or something like that. So I'm just wondering, is there something that can require, based on the speed of the speed limit of the road, have something that limits or prohibits like garages in particular.
I'm gonna say something that's gonna go against what you had, but in terms of the roofs, I feel that solar heat gain, I'm all for lighter roofs, but as long as, we're gonna have solar panels on top of it, so that'll darken it, actually, putting the solar panels on top of it.
And let me explain why we had this
I
discussion
know.
once before. My reasoning is this. If you make a roof white to reflect heat, the maximum reflectivity you get is approximately R1. It's a very small number. We live in an environment where we're in a cool climate for about 8 or 9 months out of the year. We do have a warm period, which is coming up, hopefully. But it doesn't get into the scalding temperatures. If we get 90 degrees on a couple of days, that's most of it. On the other side of that, a dark roof absorbs heat in the wintertime when we need it. Now, I know solar panels are going to take up a lot of roof areas in all of these projects, and I'm all for that. But I don't believe the heat gain is worth the eye pain. Looking down on white roofs when you live on a hillside is nightmarish. My lower neighbor painted his roof white for a few years and then realized it wasn't doing any good for his heat load. Neither of us have air conditioning, so he painted it back to a gray, which is what it was before. He hasn't experienced any difference in the temperature inside his house. He has very little insulation on his roof. And I just don't think in our climate that it's worthwhile doing. Now, if you were in Phoenix, I'd be all for it because every bit would count. But it just doesn't make sense in our climate. It's like doing it in Sausalito. So that's my reason not to have white roofs. And I promise not to bring it up again.
No, I mean, by the way, Jim, for these, I know we've disagreed on the single families that have come through, but on the larger developments, I definitely am in favor of darker colors. I think it, like when you've got that much mass on a hill or whatever, I think dark, I'm not sure exactly what the numerical value is, but dark developments definitely blend into hillsides a lot better than light ones.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking off of Paradise, those really expensive apartments by Corte Madera. I think they are in Corte Madera.
The Preserve.
The Preserve, yeah. That is not what we want. They're separate buildings, but they're straight up. No, it's the Preserve. It's called the
I think it used
Preserve.
to be called that, on Robin Drive.
It's on
The border of Tiburon and.
yeah, it's at next to Marine Country Day School. Yeah, yeah. And then they're actually building townhomes there. Brand new ones. I can't see, it's hard to see what's going exactly on there, but I think they're going to be luxury townhomes over there, and they're a bit more respectful.
About 23 of them.
But they're they're staggered and on the hillside. And it seems a little bit less than these like orbs that are sort of sitting on alien orbs on a hillside. So do we have any other sort of guidance, like overarching guidance that we'd like to provide? I do appreciate Jim's diagram, this one in the front, where he actually got the elevator on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're meeting FHA. So there is a way. I'm always skeptical. How do you get the elevator on this staggered thing? So I don't know what slope this is or a grade.
2 to 1.
It's 2 to 1. Okay.
About the maximum you'll find.
I do appreciate this. This is actually, I like this, this elevation right here. I think the concept is very well taken, so I support that.
Initial gut is something like this. I mean, because this gets on what, 4 units on 3 to 4 unit clusters, it gets what, 15 to 20. Like, is something like this potentially get us to the densities that we need, or not even close?
No, you'll get.
You can get a 500 square foot, 600 square foot, 1 bedroom. That's a unit.
No, you can get 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units in this.
Yeah, I mean, the cross section on the top, I think undoubtedly would get you up to the
Get up
the
to
density, the 30-foot height limit. I mean, there's some, I want to take another look at it. Elevators and parking podiums. So a very affordable way to put the parking, within the building is going to be in a garage that's off of an alley. Use
not on a slope like this.
well,
Because you've got to build huge
Right.
retaining walls to get.
Well,
the whole area
but the structured parking in under a concrete podium gets to be very expensive. So there is,
You'll have to do a retaining wall. on
well,
the
it
hillside.
gets to be issue in terms of housing affordability. So, we're gonna have to balance. It's another thing that we're gonna have to figure out how to balance it. And an elevator would be a cost.
Do you have to
also
do
a
that
cost.
study? Do you have to do feasibility on cost? I mean, what you're suggesting right now is that because the concrete, any subterranean concrete basement parking is extremely expensive. So the likelihood of somebody actually doing affordable ones is very low. Unless the market units are, multi-million dollar units.
You've got a hillside you've got to deal with. You're gonna have to do retaining walls, drainage.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to have a grade that is 18%. We might tweak it to 20 in some areas. But you are not going to find it's cheap to build on hillsides no matter what. And you've got excavation.
Yep.
For a retaining wall for the building or for the garage, might as well be one and the same. Otherwise, you're gonna have to build 2.
I guess, looking at the presentation you did, there was the walls over 3.5 required design review, walls over 6. I mean, is that something where we need to be more generous in that area in order to get to easier development on hillside?
I'm sorry, the parameters were, I missed.
The presentation had retaining walls as second bullet point on one of the work with slopes slides, walls
Yeah,
over 3.5 required design review.
I think we're gonna be able to, attain that. I mean, I think the amount of cut that we're gonna want to allow for a foundation, wall is probably gonna be pretty high, expressly to allow for a parking podium, so for instance, there's a affordable housing project, I think it's in Mill Valley, it's by Ben Meter, Williams and Pollock, that is a 16-foot cut in order to get a parking garage under some multifamily housing. That's a precedent, that uses the parking podium, we're talking about. You do have a parking podium in locally that is market rate housing. I don't know what how old it is and so forth, but that it's organized around a courtyard. And then below that is the parking. So, there are some precedents and so forth. I know through my own professional experience, however, and since we're writing a zoning code that is meant to be able to apply to many projects and not stand in the way as far as economic constraints of affordable housing, that from the standpoint of allowing affordable housing, it'd be prudent to not assume a parking podium in all places.
Yeah,
But then you're gonna use it more and more of the lot and have more and more. retaining
Well, that's
walls.
right. And we're going to have to look at that, right?
I mean,
It might be that we're not market economists, right? If we had a market economist on the team, then they could run the pro forma and let us know whether it's reasonable or not. So we have to rely on what we
but
see.
do you have to test that though? I'm asking you, do you?
No,
No, okay.
We're not going to
okay.
do a pro forma on
In
this.
general, it would be like-
We're going to use what we've seen in the field And we've seen a lot of garages that are not parking podiums in the field.
So if we're agnostic as to how deep, a minimum or a maximum of like 15-foot retaining wall, as long as we don't say that.
Well, if
then-
it's under the building, then it's out of sight,
Doesn't matter.
right? So the 16-foot would be under the building. Otherwise, I see no reason not to use the standards that you've already got in place, which I believe is 3.5 feet within a certain setback from streets and up to 6 feet, I think. And
I don't remember the 3.5, but I know there's a 6 foot.
Or maybe it's 2.5.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 6 foot is set in setbacks.
And then jogging it, using the guidelines, minimizing the extent without breaking the plane. I mean, we can write all that into it. And we have to write a code that's going to be flexible. That's not going to, presume that it can only be designed one way. I guess that's also an objective in this, is to really make sure that we address the concerns and also allow enough flexibility so that a designer could, interpret it based on whatever the program is. And we can't really presume to know exactly what the program's is going to be.
Any other pieces of guidance? It's pretty late, but
I think just very quickly, one thing we haven't touched on that much, I don't think, is landscaping and ways it could break up almost a horizontal kind of massing on some of these buildings. I know we talked about step backs and clusters, but just raising it as something that we might be interested in more prescriptive landscaping items.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
For that purpose.
My building on that and also building on Chairperson Kim's comment. Yeah, call them frontage improvements, which may or may not be within the public right of way, such as sidewalks and landscaping and so forth. They're definitely something that we can require of the developer.
and bike.
And bike, yeah, and yeah, I read one letter that talked about bicycling along Paradise and how important that is.
But also, I mean, there's minimum standards as to providing so the big thing about multifamily is providing a safe place to store those bikes, especially with the advent of electric bikes. This is actually becoming a bigger issue. So just.
Thank you. That's a good point.
There's going to be a loss of a large number of eucalyptus trees on certain sites around here, or undesirable trees, let's say. And a need for substantial screening along the property lines from adjacent residences, particularly it'll be sensitive where there are single family residences abutting this multifamily area. And it would be helpful to encourage larger setbacks in that area to allow for more planting zones.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I like that, not only visual, but
they're-
also sound wise, acoustic wise, it'll
acoustic,
help,
right.
it'll help for both.
Yeah, and there might be, we have to look at the heritage tree and how that might affect the capacity of these sites, and whether there might be some provision that would allow some replacement, and that replacement could happen in these pockets along a road, for instance.
Is a 3-foot diameter eucalyptus tree considered a heritage tree?
Yes, it is.
Really?
Makes no difference, yeah.
But we can, we could address that in the code, this code perhaps.
Yeah, I think,
Get the fire marshal to declare it a fire nuisance.
if it's not a protected species, I mean, we should use that more of a standard rather than the size, to be honest.
Well, most of these codes that I've seen and I've written have excluded certain species that are pyrophytic trees
Yep.
from the list of heritage trees that have to be retained.
Yeah, the pyrophilic ones, yeah, we shouldn't be, especially if they're non-native pyrophilic. That's even more concerning. In terms of buffers to environmental, I mean, I don't know how all of you feel, but I feel that there is already a setback requirement if it is a federally protected stream or waterway.
It's a state requirement of 100 feet. That's an active stream.
Yeah.
It's a state requirement of 100 feet if it's an active stream.
Mhm.
Well,
From a
and-
building standpoint.
Currently,
Uh,
your general plan has a standard that goes beyond that for even ephemeral streams. So that may be a real constraint. We're looking at that right now. But that is currently in the general plan, so
What is it right now? 100 feet?
it depends upon the
Emerald.
size of the site, but at sites that are over 5 acres, I think, Matt, it's 100 feet.
That's pretty
Right.
restrictive.
It is. It can be, yes.
Well, and the ODDS gets tricky because, you know, with certain streams, the State Department of Fish and Game is going to want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Authority,
if
so,
it's federal, if it's state, yeah, I actually don't think as a design review board, we can really state anything more because we're not biologists. Yeah,
Based on some of the comments we received tonight and the written comments, I think, we will be working with the environmental consultant that did the general plan to see, to the extent that we can develop objective standards for some of the environmental aspects that have been brought up. Again, challenging, but she may have some good suggestions.
and we have to, examine the ODDS legislation. I think more carefully just to see what exemptions may exist for environmental reasons.
yeah, I don't want to trip that
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, no, we want to make sure that we're being consistent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think, do we have any more comments? I think we've hopefully given you enough direction.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to close. Yeah, I really appreciate all the comments and I've heard many new ideas, eloquent ideas. I heard many comments that reinforced my own sort of design sensibility. I really appreciated this idea of not having, streets lined by garage doors and so forth, which, is definitely my bias and so forth. I think as far as a proxy for views go, I think, some ideas are kind of churning in my head and we'll come back with some diagrams and some site studies so that we can begin to fine tune our thinking.
Thank you so much and sorry for the length. This meeting's, I guess it's a meeting or hearing or discussions adjourned. Oh,
Did you say you were going to close with something or?
No, that was the closing remark. Thank you.
thank you.